folks. Information Doesn't Want to Be Free by Cory Doctorow. I like to describe this as a handbook for creative people who want to make money on the internet. But we will see that it was written in 2014 and some of the ideas here have evolved or changed. Cory Doctorow is an internet advocate. He fights a lot for personal privacy and less regulation of sharing, which we'll see later in the examination of his book. He has written, most recently, a novel called Walk Away, and one of my favorite books by him is a young adult book called Little Brother, which is about kids, teens, living in a surveillance state. Information Doesn't Want to Be Free is divided up into 3 laws, and we'll go one by one and take a look at them. Doctorow's first law. Anytime someone puts a lock on something that belongs to you and won't give you the key, the lock isn't there for your benefit. It's a little bit confusing. If you purchase a book from Amazon on your Kindle, there is a digital lock on that book that prevents you from sharing it with other people who have e-readers. Doctorow is saying that if you buy this book and you can't share it however you like, even though you own it, that lock is to benefit Amazon more than it is to benefit you or the creator. This is where it gets a little bit gray. Digital locks prevent people from stealing. If you have a lock on a book that you have written, this prevents it from being shared widespread across the internet without you getting paid. For the creator, a digital lock is generally a good thing because it increases the likelihood that you will get paid for the thing you wrote. In Information Doesn't Want to Be Free, the author's saying if you have a digital lock on a product, like a book, it will increase the likelihood that someone is going to try and steal it. This isn't really true in 2019 when things are pretty easy to purchase on the internet. Piracy tends to not make sense just because it's more effort than just shelling out the amount of money it takes to download the item directly from Google or Amazon or a third party like Gumroad. Doctorow's second law. Fame won't make you rich, but you can't get paid without it. The idea here is that if your art isn't easily shared on the internet, you will never reach a level of fame that will get you paid. This is generally and immediately false. We've seen that having niche audiences and small collections of very loyal fans is more than enough to make a living online. Followers and sharing really doesn't have too much weight on your ability to make a living off of your art. However, exposure and marketing is good. There is a adage that has become popular that all you need is 1,000 true fans in order to make a living selling your product or service on the internet. I will provide a link to that article below. The idea is if 1,000 people love your product enough that they're all willing to put like $50 down towards it, that scales to a lot of money, $50,000. So if you get 1,000 people really interested and ready to purchase, it's more than enough to get the ball rolling as far as your business goes. So you don't need to be famous, and this second law is generally false. The reason Cory Doctorow believes this to be a rule in 2014, he says by putting digital locks on your product, you prevent your ability to get famous. You are undermining your ability to go viral. This is generally false. You can still market and put locks on the thing that you are selling, and it will not affect how widespread the sharing of your your brand or service is on the internet. Does that make sense? There's marketing, and then there's the product. Marketing through Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, that is easily shared, whereas the product itself is the thing that you want to put locks on. Doctorow's third law. Information doesn't want to be free, people do. This one is a little bit confusing for me. It's mainly about how censorship on the internet is bad. Cory Doctorow leads us through this train of thought that if we crack down on people who are pirating content, we are going to eventually live in a surveillance state where none of us can feel comfortable sharing anything online with fear of being persecuted for like sending a song in an email attachment to a friend. When Cory Doctorow says information doesn't want to be free, people do. People want to have the choice and the freedom to share the content they like. They can do this without stealing it, and that's where he gets a little bit confused. Doctorow goes wrong in concluding that the only way to have a free internet is to have less regulation on what gets shared. To sum up the 3 laws, in 2014, what Cory Doctorow didn't realize is that the internet would get easier to use. Way back when, people were freely sharing and sending things over the internet just because very few people knew how to do that, and they were able to share art via torrents and other unregulated channels just because there were so few people online who knew that what they were doing. Now, there are 3 clear benefits to buying and legitimately purchasing artwork on the internet. 1, you're supporting the artist. They either get a royalty or the profits go directly to them depending on what platform you're using. 2, security. You're not downloading something from an untrusted source. When you spend money downloading Hotel Artemis from Google Play, you're likely just getting Hotel Artemis from Google Play and not malicious software. Lastly, it's all organized. You have it in one place with the correct information, which I know was particularly a problem with file sharing in the early days. The file that was titled wasn't necessarily what you got. What I think Doctorow wants is that he wishes people were more comfortable sharing the things that they made. However, because we put so much time and effort into our art, it, I think, is rational to want to be compensated appropriately for something that you put a lot of time and effort in. There are 2 things, however, that I really liked about this book. 1 is the concept of sending ideas out like dandelion seeds. Sort of like what Eric Ries? Sort of like what is presented in the book, The Lean Startup. The cost of innovation and trying things out on the internet is super low. It's basically 0. You can start a newsletter, upload a YouTube video, make music for very little to no cost and have a worldwide audience access it. For that reason, you should try everything. You have the luxury of being able to do 100 experiments at no cost and then following the ones that work. Sending out seeds like a dandelion. As opposed to mammalian upbringing, which I would say is similar to how book publishers used to work. Previously, there were gatekeepers, book publishers, that had the means to print your book at mass scale and then distribute it to the world. It was very expensive, and so they had to make sure that the things that they were publishing were worth their investment. For that reason, you would work very long and hard on writing a novel that was good enough to be distributed to the masses, which then justified the cost. Today, you can access the masses at very little cost. Honestly, you could do it at none. I published a book with Cheyenne recently, and we got it to a worldwide audience. It cost us, as far as distribution, for like $3 for the proof. Just doing fist pumps. So, instead of putting all of this effort into one thing that you then hand over to a distributor, you can cut out that middle person and distribute your experiment or your art to a mass audience at a very high rate of turnover. Try new things, fucking do it. Second, in the preface, Amanda Palmer discusses that she was a street performer that would do a living statue act called the 8-Foot Bride. And some people would stop and enjoy, wouldn't tip anything. Some people stopped and enjoyed and tipped. Some people would tip a lot, some would tip a little. But she realized day in and day out that she made a reliable and consistent income from street performing. She could almost predict the amount of money that she would make depending on how much time she spent on the street. On the internet, you are essentially street performing, and it's on you to do a good job and make great content and to have a tip jar that is easily accessible, ideally through a service like Patreon or Ko-fi. If your work is good enough, people want to give you money, and all you need is a way for people to give it to you easily. In conclusion, was this a good book? Yes, because I think it facilitated the dialogue of people meeting the internet and trying to figure out the most reasonable way to share their content. Cory Doctorow really thought that the best possible scenario would be for people to not really take credit, to put everything up on the internet, hope for the best, have a money bucket, and share their artwork freely. This is a model that some people use, but in terms of supporting the artist, I believe that regulation sometimes benefits people who put a lot of time and effort into drawing or writing a book, and that way they're protected and compensated appropriately for the things that they make. You don't need to be famous. You don't need to take all your watermarks and locks off of your books. All you need is to make something good and communicate that on the internet that it's available. Word of mouth, to this day, is still one of the most reliable ways to sell a product. If it's good enough, people are going to talk about it. Followers do not correlate to your success. Followers dictate how many eyes are on your product. I know people who have 1,000 followers and make a living off of that. And there are some people who have hundreds of thousands of followers, can't turn a profit. I think that touches on everything. I really like this book. It's a little bit dated, and honestly, the purpose of it is to get you thinking. And if you are into what I'm into, we're just here to share ideas. Ugh! Thanks for watching, and I'll see you back. No. No?
No.
Up, left.
More that way.
This way?